The following video contains spoilers. We suggest watching the episodes alone in the dark. Or not, because they suck. Hello, Wolfpack! We're back, and today we return once more into the underrated classic horror series known as R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour. For those of you who are new here, my name is Catastrophe, one of the hosts of the ironically named channel Wolf Entertainment, and I review just about every episode of The Haunting Hour show. But while I personally love and cherish this show as much as The Clone Wars, Green Lantern, The Simpsons, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and The Twilight Zone combined, I've sadly learned the hard way that this show wasn't as perfect as we remembered it, and it did have its abject failures here and there. The Haunting Hour was a horror anthology series from the Hub Network, which was produced by author R.L. Stine, the creator of the Goosebumps and the Nightmare Room books. And while he didn't write every episode, his staff did provide us dozens of decent horror tales entertaining people of all ages, and brought horror stories to new heights. However, even this show had some bad eggs on the rack. And we're here to warn you about this show's outright awful abominations, so nobody ever has to sit through the crap this show had on its good reputation. Now, there will be massive spoilers in this video, since sadly, a lot of my reasons for despising these tales are linked to major plot points that happen in the episode, acting as a botched twist, so you have been warned. Also, just an FYI, these episodes are Haunting Hour episodes that I hate with a passion, meaning that this list is going to be biased. I hate these episodes a lot, and while most of the fandom seems to agree with me about their suckitude, this is an opinion-based video. So all the crybabies who can't handle the fact that The Haunting Hour had piss-poor episodes from time to time better leave now, since this will get ugly. Now that we're all hyped up, let's stop wasting time and begin. What were the most horrific failures and disappointments of R.L. Stine's greatest series ever? Let's find out. These are my top 10 worst episodes of The Haunting Hour. Number 10. Return of the Pumpkinheads. Yeah, you all know it's not a top 10 worst horror stories list without including a disappointing sequel on it. Return of the Pumpkinheads was the hyped-up sequel episode to the fan-favorite Haunting Hour Halloween special, Pumpkinhead, which was a very creepy adventure about a mass-murdering farmer and his demonic pumpkin people abducting and killing children in order to create an army of murderous monsters to overwatch the cursed farmland and keep the plants safe from them stupid humans. It was a pretty decent episode, and it has great nightmare fuel. So of course, the show wanted to make a second chapter to it, since the original left so many questions up in the air, and the fans wanted more. The problem? It did not answer any of these questions. It did not address the original tale's story like it ever happened at all. It follows a slew of new unlikable main characters. The farmer, who was the central antagonist of the last plot, anticlimactically died off-screen. And worst of all, the Pumpkinheads became secondary characters in their own story. The old Pumpkinhead tale left off with the vague sequel bait, implying that one of the original kids named Dave survived the nightmarish ordeal and would possibly be alive again for a follow-up adventure. But this episode instantly opens up saying that he did live, but he moved away and gave up completely on saving any more people who died to the demons. Plus, the original farmer who made the pumpkin heads died off screen sometime in between the two episodes after a time skip, which guaranteed that absolutely none of our questions regarding the pumpkin heads would ever get answered or even acknowledged. Yeah, the two characters who we wanted to see in a sequel and would have made a much better sequel tale than what we got were gone and never coming back. Great start. Alright, but what's the actual story about? Well, instead, we follow a horribly stupid, selfish, dysfunctional family moving onto a haunted farm ground at random to become a closer unit before naturally getting assaulted by the Pumpkinheads, who are still alive and reclaiming their territory. Cool. The main characters suck. They suck so much. The two kids in this episode are total smug jerks who constantly whine on and on and on, and you don't really connect to them because they spend so much screen time complaining about how this cursed farmhouse sucks and snapping at their parents. The adults aren't much better. They are total idiots who care nothing for their own children. Evidently, the parents just wanted to move away from their old life entirely to go live on a pumpkin patch. They seriously just up and moved without letting their kids know and expect them to adjust to their new lives without any concern for their feelings. Are we supposed to want these people to die? Because right now, I couldn't care less if they all died, since this follows the cliched horror movie route of making all the characters douches and morons for no reason. Speaking of which, Return of the Pumpkinheads feels very much like a cheap generic slasher movie sequel. The main characters act like jerks and idiots for a good half hour, wander around the haunted farmland doing nothing, and the Pumpkinheads take their sweet, sweet, slow time getting around to killing them. Why? I honestly don't understand why they just don't kill the entire family as soon as possible, since we later see they do just that during Halloween night. Yeah, this episode is so dang slow that it drags out for an eternity. It's only half an hour, but it feels much longer than it actually is. We follow the main characters being annoying for a long time, while sometimes a Pumpkinhead would show up just to troll them before running away. Then, at the final act, the killing spree truly begins. We never learn anything about the Pumpkinheads, and the villains are sidelined in their own sequel for this idiot cliched family bickering. So the Pumpkinheads mercifully off the stupid parents, but the kids still stupidly try to save the adults, even though it's made loud and clear that no doctor can ever heal those mutated pumpkins on their heads. But just when they're about to get away, the parents become full-grown demons and kill their own children. So yay, happy ending for all of us who hated them. This tale was boring, slow, dull, uninspired, and worst of all, cliched. It is cliched to the max. The Return of the Pumpkinheads sucks because it's a generic slasher movie sequel that squandered all potential it could have had as its own unique story to just chase every predictable horror cliche it could grasp. After getting two successful sequels that explored Lily D and Jake Skinner's development, adding even more into their story arcs, this one did not do that. If you love the first Pumpkinhead story, then please, stay away from this one, because it's a total downgrade. In the end, this was just a rotten Sour Patch that tricked the fans with the idea that it would be a delicious treat. Number 9. Best Friend Forever. Oh boy. The Haunting Hour, a horror series well praised for its awesome, deep, and terrifying horror stories, now wants to try out a wacky dark comedy episode where a ditzy little boy takes in a pet zombie. Let's get this over with. Best Friend Forever has a good idea, but a lot of viewers hated it for trying to be comedic, since none of the jokes were all that funny. This episode's biggest problem is that it's disgustingly sick and squicky. This episode just has the grossest concept I have ever seen on this show, and that's saying a lot about a series that has child death in it on every other episode. A little boy takes in a pet old man. Yes, the zombie is a dead 40-year-old man dubbed Cheeky who wants to get closer to this little boy, going so far as to stalk him, hug him, be fed by him, and worst of all, cuddling with him in bed. And the kid hero actually enjoys all this. A child enjoys this. Can you see why some viewers might be turned off by this idea? The basic concept alone is disgusting. Cheeky feels like a gross, decaying pedophile, but the show is really hoping we'd find him funny and charming. And if any of you say, "Oh, well, Kat, you're breathing in way too much thought into this. It's just a kid show." Guess what? I was a kid when this show was still on TV, and I hated this episode back then too. This was the worst episode of the show's first season, because it was unsettling then, and it's unsettling now. The plot itself is not much better. This tale pretty much follows every hide the pet from the adults cliche in the book. Our kid hero not only keeps this old man zombie pedophile pet in his house, but he also hilariously tries to hide it from everyone as Cheeky fumbles around the area. Real original. Then after a good 25 minutes of Cheeky screwing up and getting uncomfortably closer to this underage boy, the twist reveals that Cheeky was really doing all this in order to abduct a child and keep him as a slave in his bedroom the entire time. And this children's show actually closes out with the boy screaming in fear that a grown man is chaining him underneath his basement, force-feeding him feces. Great way to close out this wacky family comedy, huh? Best Friend Forever is stupid and nauseating, even for a horror series geared towards viewers of all ages. It's not funny, it's not charming, it's not fun, it's not well acted, and the concept of a pet zombie is thoroughly wasted for easy, lowbrow, stupid humor. Best Friend Forever is a tale that has not held up well over time, and most people I talk to hate the story because they found it too stupid, even for a goofy kid show. This episode showcases why The Haunting Hour had a bad reputation when it comes to silly dark comedy episodes, and they only got worse and worse and worse. Bottom line, Best Friend Forever is an episode that was simply the definition of dead on arrival. Number 8. Near Mint Condition. Near Mint Condition is another goofy comedy episode that fails to be funny and interesting, featuring a wasted villain, very dumbed-down storytelling, and annoyingly bland main characters. In this tale, we follow a smug loser nerd named Ted, who is an obvious parody of Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, purchasing a haunted killer cybernetic teddy bear called the Mangler to complete his stupid nerd collection. But unbeknownst to him, the Mangler is actually alive and programmed with the need to kill everyone in its path. Not going to draw this out, Near Mint Condition's greatest weakness is its tonal inconsistency. This episode cannot decide whether or not it wants to just be a stupid comedy for kids or a dark, serious killer doll adventure like the Lily D story arc. The Mangler is intended to be a comedic villain, but it never really does anything all that funny. Like, at all. The Mangler is played almost entirely dead seriously. The killer teddy bear is oddly treated as a truly dangerous cyborg killer who does pose as a threat to the entire world in a comedy. It doesn't really speak or do anything all that humorous, and just acts as ominous as any other antagonist on this show. So in this comedy episode, the Mangler soon assaults and nearly kills a teenage boy across the street, leading to Ted and his brother theorizing that the teddy bear might be responsible, since they find a blue furball at the crime scene, which the police somehow missed, since of course the cops don't set up crime scenes for child murders. You know, something they did do in The Return of Lily D. After some pretty dull and straightforward mystery solving that involves zero jokes, the boys think the Mangler is dangerous since it was apparently a defective toy that killed tons of children, rather than played with them. So naturally, they do nothing to look further into this, and are surprised when the doll does come alive and attempts to kill them later. We then get what I think is meant to be a funny fight scene between the nerds and the killer doll, but again, aside from some stupid reactions and goof-ups, it's still played surprisingly seriously. But after finally having enough, Ted kills it in one of the stupidest boss fights this show has ever had. That's it? One slash from a sword and the villain dies? All that buildup for an intentionally lame final fight scene? This was the joke we were building up to? So, like a moron, Ted then fixes the doll he killed and resells it in near mint condition. Yeah, this episode was just plain stupid. It's amazingly unfunny, unimpressive, and pretty darn boring for a killer doll story. I think this episode was designed to be a mocking parody of the Lily D story arc, since this episode recycles a lot of plot points and the climax from those episodes. But again, none of it is really funny or interesting. The main characters sucked, the villain was ironically not funny in a comedy episode, the story could not decide on what tone it wanted, the comedy in this was pretty lame, the plot was done a million times before, and worst of all, this episode leaves us with nothing. It's so dang forgettable. Compared to the other Haunting Hour episodes where people would fight for what would make it on their top 10 best episode lists, this one does not even stand a chance at making it in as anyone's favorite story ever. I think the Mangler being played seriously in a stupid story was supposed to be the joke, but the writers take it nowhere, and it falls so flat on its face. Overall, this failed experiment was just an unbearable product. Get it? Unbearable. Unbearable. Hey, it's much funnier than what we got in this snorefest. Long story short, this was a boring bad comedy.
What do we do now?
Toss it in the garbage.
Number 7. Goodwill Toward Men. This Christmas special was unfortunately the unexpected series finale closing out the Haunting Hour show forever after Discovery Family bought out the Hub network. And it was a pretty terrible way to wrap things up. In this story, we follow a rich girl named Missy and her smug elitist jerk family bragging about how great their life is and firing their lower class gardeners for daring to talk to them like actual people. The nerve! Missy is upset with how her family has gotten so fat-headed, but they don't care, and a good chunk of this story is dedicated to making sure you, as an audience, hate this family. All of them suck, except for Missy, who is the token good teammate that we're supposed to like, since she grows to hate her jerk relatives as well. However, during Christmas Day, an angel comes down from heaven and plays God by switching the elitist jerk family's lives with the lower class gardener's family they were mean to, causing Missy's family to become homeless and learn how to survive on the cold, harsh streets with nothing but the clothes on their back. Alright, so this is a humbling adventure where they learn a lesson to be good, right? Not necessarily. No kitten around, no joke. A good half of this episode is also about the rich family crying about how they aren't rich anymore and being poor sucks. Yep, they don't learn anything. They don't become nicer people. They don't even know how to act like normal, down-to-earth survivors. They just cry and cry and cry about how much their new life sucks. Missy finally calls them out on their jerk attitudes, but they still don't learn anything. The fact that this episode doesn't even try to make these people deeper characters beyond self-entitled jerks doesn't make us like them or hope they overcome their issues. It just makes us hate them even more. The family were jerks when they were elitist douches, and they're just as bad as when they become poor. The only good person in this is, like I said, Missy, who does pass the angel's secret test of character and proves to be nothing like her awful family. So the angel once more plays God and resets the whole universe, where Missy is now related to the poor family, who still have the rich family's life and money, and the original family Missy had and was born into is now the humble, down-to-earth gardeners who work for Missy's new family now. Yep. Our heroic angel of Christmas kindness resolves everything by brainwashing everyone and resetting God's universe for her own egotistical goal to prove a point. Truly the masterwork of a divine noble angel teaching us humbleness. And what does this story teach everyone?
We leave our dear people with hopes burning bright, families altered and spirits set right. But the greedy received happiness, some may exclaim. I wish to see them end up writhing in pain. All we can say to those with that view is even the rich deserve Christmas cheer too.
Yes, even the rich deserve Christmas too. You heard that right, everyone. The lesson we got out of all of this was that even the rich deserve Christmas too. You hear that, all you poor families out there? The rich deserve Christmas too. The rich deserve Christmas too. The rich deserve Christmas too. The rich... This episode was awful. This piss-poor moral was just a cherry on top of a crap sundae. The family being unlikable jerks who refused to learn anything or changed and had to be brainwashed into becoming good people totally harms the idea of Christmas bringing out the good in us. And Missy's entire reality getting rewritten by an angel playing God is the most un-Christian thing I've ever seen in my life. That's like turning the great Buddha into Thanos. How do you even mess up a simple theme like that, Haunting Hour? Our angel, who is supposed to be our noble Christmas hero, mind you, rewrote all of reality and messed with this family for a laugh, and yet she still acts like the good guy. Why? Because even the rich deserve Christmas too. This episode feels like it was a majorly rushed out mess without any deeper thought or effort put into it. The main characters are petty pricks, Missy suffers for no real reason at all, the Angel is not an all-loving hero, she's a self-righteous know-it-all literally playing God, the Christmas theme is a total waste, the story is not really fun or enlightening, and worst of all is the final botched message about how even the rich deserve Christmas too. This just rubs so much salt in the wounds when you remember that all those homeless people the family encountered are still dirt poor and dying on the streets. Oh, that's right, those homeless people are still starving in the snowlands. Yeah, you're really wrapping this present up nicely, you morons. Goodwill toward men is just an emotionally hollow, sloppy mess that fills us up with more hate than love. The show desperately wanted to give us a thoughtful send-off to this fantastic horror series, but in my opinion, Grandpa's Glasses felt like a better series finale to The Haunting Hour than this fail bomb did. In the end, this Christmas gift was nothing more than a lump of coal in the bottom of our stockings.
Is even the rich deserve Christmas cheer too?
Shut up! How could this happen to me?
Number 6. Mrs. Worthington. Oh, Mrs. Worthington, why did you have to end up as such a disappointment? Now, before I go on, I just want to say that Margot Kidder as Mrs. Worthington was not the worst part of this. My whole reason for adding this episode on this list is not because of Kidder, but in fact, because of the insulting, dumbed-down, black and white, piss-poor, anti-bullying message. Mrs. Worthington was intended to be the Haunting Hour's attempt at an anti-bullying episode. However, what should have been the darker and edgier Uncle Howie sequel ended up becoming a painful example of good intentions backfiring horribly. We follow an antisocial kid named Nate who is abused by his big bully sister Molly and neglected by his awful, punchable mother. To vent out his frustrations, he draws several disturbing pictures of his waifu, Mrs. Worthington, torturing his bully sister for fun and revenge, since he's so unhinged by all the years of horribly cruel behavior from her. We're supposed to like these kids, right? But one day, Nate wishes upon a star, causing Mrs. Worthington to enter the real world and exact the revenge the child wished for, tormenting Molly for a larf at every turn. Hooray! However, out of freaking nowhere, Nate decides that Mrs. Worthington is the real bully, and his jerk sister who beats him, trashed his things, and tormented him to the point of getting mentally scarred for life, is now the innocent victim he wants to save, since he realizes that his abusive big sister is not as bad as Mrs. Worthington is. Yep, just like that, without any counter-argument, this episode teaches us to forgive abusive family members for traumatizing us for life because they are still your family, and you should love them no matter what.
Oh, shit!
Yeah, there is no reason for this at all, other than to just force Mrs. Worthington as the true villain, even though Mrs. Worthington is doing all of this because she wants to protect her creator, and Molly is much, much worse. The writer of this garbage actually expects us to just forget how horribly abusive Nate's family has been towards him and hope that he saves them from his guardian's wrath even though he wished for it in the first place. What follows is several non-scary moments, emotionless failures to make us like any of these people, and a completely stupid plot that just gives up near the end. But the true crowning moment of stupidity goes to this scene, where Mrs. Worthington actually holds Molly captive with speed knitting. speed knitting. For the love of all that's holy, the show really tries to make speed knitting horrifying. Speed knitting! Not helping matters is how Nate unrealistically gets over all his trauma and mental illness in a matter of minutes, deciding that he loves the family who abused and neglected his feelings for his whole life over the woman who protected him. Yep, he gets over his jerk sister being mean to him for all his life and forgives his family since Mrs. Worthington is worse than them. Mrs. Worthington, the woman who was created specifically to protect him and defended him from the bullies, is now the true bully just because she punishes Molly for her atrocious behavior. Fail, Haunting Hour. Epic fail. So Nate turns against his true bully, Mrs. Worthington, and just so the audience makes sure that they know Mrs. Worthington is the true evil after all, the witch babysitter attempts to cut out Nate's tongue for mouthing off to her. Yeah, Molly, who abused Nate for his entire life to the point of emotional pain and possible insanity, gets tied up and scared straight. But Nate, who made Mrs. Worthington real, mouths off to her once, and he gets his tongue cut off. If that doesn't tell you how forced this story is, I don't know what will. So, how does Nate stop his real bully, Mrs. Worthington, from killing them all when this episode preached on and on about how violence is never the answer? He kills her. Yep. This story that wanted to teach kids that using violence to solve all your problems is wrong resolves everything with violence. Did anyone proofread this crap? So Nate and Molly unrealistically get over a lifelong abusive relationship, a nightmarish fight against a witch, and become best friends. The horrible mother pats herself on the back for doing absolutely nothing to raise her kids right, and we end this episode on the ultimate predictable horror story ending of Mrs. Worthington being revealed to still be alive and coming back for revenge. But I don't care, because all of these people are awful. Aside from trying to make the viewer forgive a family of two-faced abusive douchebags and morons, there really isn't a single character you can root for in this. Nate is mentally unwell and gets over his lifelong abuse with unrealistic ease. Molly is a jerk and a moron who gets away scot-free with everything she did. Their own mother is an awful person for neglecting her kids and doing no parenting whatsoever. And even Mrs. Worthington loses a ton of sympathy once she's forced into the generic evil villain mode. While Margot Kidder does do a decent job entertaining us, this episode's worst quality is the writing. The episode is boring, not funny, not scary, not smart, not welcoming, and the horribly botched anti-bullying moral feels insulting towards people with abusive histories or real bullying issues. In fact, this episode feels like it praises bullying and abuse more than informs us on its harsh reality. To put it simply, this episode tells bully victims that they should forgive their bullies and abusive family members for picking on them. Screw you! I consider it the worst because it tried to be something more with a deep message, but the writer clearly didn't try hard enough. Mrs. Worthington deserves to be bullied itself for being a piece of gross, insulting garbage. Number 5. Stage fright. When I heard that R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour was doing a haunted theater show theme on par with the Phantom of the Auditoriums, I was initially super excited. Until I actually saw it. And, oh boy, this one was Emmy Award-winning crap. The tale of stage fright is simple. We follow a group of drama students performing a stage play adaptation of the classic Hansel and Gretel fable. However, a ghost is rumored to haunt all the schools that produce this show, causing a chain of bad luck to all those who have a role in it. But naturally, this legend is true, and the stupid drama kids get attacked by a ghost witch who hates their performance. She's not the only one, because this episode's worst trait of all is the painful, awkward, unfunny comedy. No joke, this episode is another bad comedy episode that is so cruelly unfunny that I needed a few breaks to breathe in all the horrible stand-up routines every 5 minutes. These kids were such painfully bad comedians even when they weren't intentionally pretending they were bad. Not even Princess Cadence could make this episode any more tolerable. No, really, Britt McKillop, Princess Cadence's voice actress, was in this face-palming glurge. She plays a tree. There is only one joke in this whole episode. The student play sucks. That's it. The ghost assaults a few of the actors backstage, then the kids fail to improvise or make the show work well, even though they're highly trained actors. That is all. Their student play sucks, the kids can't act, everyone is laughing at their failure, the teens cry, and the show stretches this one premise out for half an hour. It's just so cringy. These kids are painfully unfunny, and their one sole joke wore out its welcome instantly. And to be honest, it was incredibly difficult for me to laugh at all the dumb, wacky hijinks, since every time the show did a bad comedy scene, it's immediately followed up with the witch very violently murdering some of the kids backstage. Like, are we supposed to laugh at that? I find it hard to chuckle at the bad comedy even more when we cut to some child getting brutally strangled to death, or that one dark scene where the witch ghost shatters some poor girl's spine. Jeez, this was a comedy episode? That's harsh. What the heck is wrong with you writers? The tone of this episode is all over the place. It does such a piss-poor job balancing out the goofy comedy and grim murder, to the point where you want to yell at the screen to just choose one mood and stick with it already. I despise the horrendous comedy in this one, because it is the definition of cringe. Oh, and for those of you who cry about how I'm being too harsh on a children's show, well, I saw this tale as a young child, and I hated it back then. I always hated whenever the Haunting Hour tried to experiment with comedy in general, because it was usually never funny. This one being pure torture straight from the Cenobites because these kids were so annoying, unfunny, and awful. Now, to be fair, I have found a few tales that did succeed at being dark comedies, but this one is not one of them. This episode also tries to play up this whole murder mystery plot where the main characters and the audience have to guess which person in the play is secretly the evil ghost witch in disguise sabotaging the show. But guess who the true mastermind was? A woman we've never seen before! Oh my gosh, who would have guessed that it was some Randy who no one ever saw? What a weak twist. This villain was also ultra lame. I hated the witch so much that I tossed her on my top 10 worst Haunting Hour villains list. So check that out if you want my full opinion on her awfulness. For now, she was a sorely disappointing antagonist, and her motive made zero sense. She wants to stop every stage play version of Hansel and Gretel ever because she claims that it's inaccurate by making her out as the villain, when really she's not. So instead of writing her own version, telling people the truth, or using her powers for good to clear her name, she planned to go to random high schools, killing tons of innocent people. I consider Stage Fright a painfully awkward tale of suspense from this show because the comedy sucked hard. The main characters were all pretty unlikable drama queens, the villain was underwhelming, the plot was full of wasted potential, the setting was good, but stapled to a boring snorefest of a plot, and worst of all, it is a fine example of how The Haunting Hour should not write comedy episodes ever again because they suck at it. This is one fail bomb that should never, ever get an encore performance.
How could this happen to me?
Number 4. Spores. Ugh. Now, here's where we go from plain bad to offensively bad. Spores is one of the most detestable tales from The Haunting Hour that I have ever sat through. This might be the chicken of The Haunting Hour. In this plot, we follow a stupid dysfunctional family named the Dixels, with heavy emphasis on dicks, who are going to camp out in a deadly haunted forest, where numerous hitchhikers have vanished without a trace. And from that description alone, every horror story fan ever can predict exactly what's going to happen. Yeah, I don't think I'm spoiling anything for anyone when I tell you that, what a shock, they all die. The idiot campers head out into a scary forest plotline has been done to death, even on this show. This episode follows every horror story cliche in the book, and does nothing new with the haunted camping trip setting at all, to the point where it feels like our favorite horror show just gave up. To make matters worse, this was one of the last episodes of the show's final season. Yeah, the second to last episode of The Haunting Hour's final season, and they still didn't care enough to give an original fun horror story that had any thought or effort mixed into it. Spores is cliched, nasty, mean-spirited, unoriginal, disappointing, and worst of all, it is boring. This episode is so butt-numbingly boring. I kid you not, this is half of the plot. The family wandering around the dark forest, searching for each other as the villains slowly pick them all off, one by one. But if that doesn't sound riveting, we also get the pleasure of watching the family's loser nerd son Melvin getting abused by his awful cruel family and puts up with these obnoxious dickwads who he's trying to save. Yep, Melvin Dixel acts nothing but kind and friendly towards everyone, and his family mocks him, belittles him, abuses his emotions, and worst of all, get him killed by dragging him down with them. Oh yay, don't you all just love it when the smart characters die in horror stories in an attempt to save the idiots? You sure know what the kids are into, Haunting Hour. But for me, the absolute lowest point in this whole episode is the family drama. First off, nobody cares about the family drama. Haunting Hour, the kids don't give a crap about a story arc redeeming an abusive family who show no humane qualities. We want to see the monsters already, not watch Michelle Krieber bully an innocent little kid. But here's the real salt in the wounds. The douchebag abusive father drags his whole family out on a trip to the woods against their wishes, all so he can beat his co-workers' family's hiking record of making it up a mountaintop in under 4 days. All this death and destruction is brought on by an abusive father having a pissing contest against some guy he doesn't like. Oh, but if that doesn't make you mad, here's where it gets sickening. Once the Dixel mother becomes infected by the spores promised in the episode, she goes missing, and the stupid family spend the whole time arguing with one another as they desperately try to find her. But when Melvin finally stands up for himself and calls the dick cheese out for dooming them, the abusive father actually tries to justify himself. He tells his kids that he really brought them all out here on this camping trip that he wanted because he actually wanted to spend more time with everyone since they were all growing up too fast, and he simply wanted to feel like they were a unit again. Yep, he plays this whole situation out like he was the victim here. This guy forced everyone on a camping trip that they didn't want to go on, emotionally and quite possibly physically abuses his son, belittles his own wife and kids for slowing him down, started all of this to show that he had a larger penis than some guy he hates, guides his family into the hands of death, refuses to admit when he screwed up, yells at everyone to do stuff his way, defends that his abusive parenting was well-intentioned, and yet this episode wants us to feel sympathy for him. No. Screw you, Haunting Hour. Screw you with a chainsaw. You cannot ever make your audience feel sorry for an abusive parent. Jack Dixell Sr. is anus scum. This guy might just be one of the worst parents this show has ever had. He abuses his family emotionally, verbally, and judging by the fact that he threatened to rip Melvin out of his car physically, yet the show wants us to connect with this monster. The scene where the abusive father spills his guts out to his kids in a moment to show that he was a well-meaning man is easily the worst moment of the entire Haunting Hour series. The show wanted us, the viewers, to feel for a man who treated his family like dirt, refused to own up to his mistakes, and essentially doomed them all in the first place by dragging them on a vacation they didn't want. Screw Jack Dixell, and triple screw the writer who made this vomit. Oh, but if you can believe it or not, things actually get even worse. This moment where the show defends an abusive father was what guaranteed a 0 out of 10 score from me. But what comes after is what inspired me to make the Decayed Skull grade for this channel. After the father justifies his abusive parenting and stupidity, he gets infected by the spores. Oh no, not him. But then he tricks the kids into following him all the way up to the mountaintop to be infected by our real main villains, who are none other than the Clickers. Yep, no joke, no exaggeration, our mysterious spore mutants this whole time were the Clickers from The Last of Us. The Haunting Hour, a show famous for its phenomenal epic horror villains, completely ripped off the Clickers. And for the hundreds of commenters who kept asking me in my Spores review, yes, I did check. The Last of Us did come out a year before this Haunting Hour episode did. So yeah, the producers did steal them, hoping nobody would ever notice.
Shame on you.
Wow, Haunting Hour. Just wow. I love this show so much, but even I can't ignore this outright theft. The Haunting Hour stole the Clickers. Granted, they do look cool, but that doesn't make the rest of this episode worth it in the end. 90% of this story is a dull snooze fest of a group of idiots wandering around the woods screaming. All the characters except for Melvin are horrible people, the villains were stolen from something else, the plot is cliched to the max, and the scares are weak, since they go by so fast. Spores was an ugly, despicable, dull, cruel mess, and predictably, everyone dies because the show demanded a dark twist ending in almost all of its episodes, even though it makes no sense here because the mutant was not morphed into a frozen-in-place creature like all the others were, but the rules this episode set up earlier were written on disposable toilet paper. I mean it. The way Melvin still loses in the end makes zero sense when you try to think about the rules these spore mutants work by. Adults won't like it because it's mean-spirited and tells us to forgive abusive fathers for trying to be good in the worst ways possible. Kids won't like it because it's unbearably boring and forgettable, and the show won't ever be proud of this episode since it's a dead weed next to much better horror tales. I hate Spores the most because of the bullcrap forgive abusive parents moment. The plagiarized villains, the bland predictable plot, the boring atmosphere, and the cruel twist ending which makes no sense. Screw the clickers. Screw Jack Dixell. Screw Michelle Krieber for saying yes to this mess. The Haunting Hour for farting out this plot in their last season without any care or hard work put in. I once gave this tale a 0 out of 10 a long time ago, but after looking back at it again, I'm retconning my score. It now gets a you infinity out of 10. It is that horrendous. Spores is a toxic weed that deserves to be shredded into fertilizer for black holes. Screw this episode, screw its piss-poor writing, screw its piss-poor character sympathy, screw the stolen clickers, and if you defend this episode, screw you too. Number 3. Pouf de fromage. Okay, you all knew this episode was definitely going to be on here, and why it achieves its title as being one of the worst episodes of the series. But if you somehow aren't aware of how hated this Haunting Hour tale is among the fanbase, allow me to explain. Pouf de fromage is unfortunately another goofy comedy episode the writers wanted to make to experiment with when they needed to add a little variety to the show in an attempt to spice up their formula. However, this was the worst comedy you could ever imagine. It makes The Room and Movie 43 look like works of Shakespeare in comparison. It was that despised. In this adventure, we follow a stupid American family with no last names adopting a foreign exchange student from France to take in that big government money, of course, because why else would these pricks do anything noble, since we find out later that they're kind of dicks.
Bobby, you should have come to us right away when you realized that Jean-Louis had a
Asshole!
The main character, Bobby, is an obnoxious, slow-witted moron who is painfully unfunny as he delivers boatloads of cringe comedy before discovering that his family's foreign exchange student, an offensively bad French stereotype named Jean-Louis, is secretly an alien who has infiltrated this one random American family in the US to prevent a global alien invasion from destroying all life across the galaxy. It's as absolutely moronic as it sounds out loud. This tale about an alien invasion is seriously a wacky comedy episode about a racist French stereotype who's really an alien agent preventing a galactic genocide from destroying the Earth. Wow, who smoked 100 joints? Exactly like near mint condition and stage fright, The Haunting Hour demonstrates its huge weakness when it comes to comedy. The writing in this tale is painfully bad. None of the jokes land, none of the main characters are likable, and the plot is super weak. But if you don't believe me, well, here's our opening joke.
You think Jean-Louis will become my best friend? Do people even have best friends in France? Do people even have best friends in France? Do people even have best friends in France?
Yeah, that's the intelligent humor we're dealing with, folks. I can already feel my brain cells dying. Jean-Louis is predictably exposed as an alien in disguise because he's a moron, so of course he teams up with the equally brain-dead failure Bobby to stop the aliens from killing us all. Many, many painful potty humor moments, lazy puns, and cringe-inducing shenanigans later, we finally discover that the alien invaders have already planted themselves among the population, with our plot twist revealing that the aliens are actually cheese puffs.
Wait, you're telling me that the aliens are cheese puffs? How could this happen to me?
Yes, for reals, the big funny twist is that our planet is being invaded by cheese puff aliens. Cheese puff aliens! What the heck were the writers on? Now, some commenters have told me that this was meant to be a shout out to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, but that was actually funny, while this episode wastes so much time with a racist French stereotype being snotty and Bobby Hill farting around, who, as I said, are not amusing in the slightest. It's simply stupid followed by pooing. No, really, there's a couple of bathroom and fart jokes in this.
Can't guess me. Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Blah de blah, can't guess me. Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Oh, I wonder if he heard me thinking about how cute Kelly Robinson is.
You've thought about this Kelly Robinson 7 times since I met you.
Does he know I just farted?
Yes.
The Haunting Hour was so desperate that they had a fart joke. This is a sad, depressing day, folks. Oh, and everyone dies in the end. This comedy episode concludes with Cheese Puffs drowning the whole earth to death. What a funny ending for all the families out there. Do I even have to tell everyone why this tale sucks? The concept alone is so stupid that it defies rationality. None of the characters are likable in this. John Louis might be an offensive racial stereotype. The villainous cheese puff aliens were this show's worst villains ever. The plot makes no sense, even as a silly comedy. The humor makes me want to kill myself. And worst of all, it's stupid. So amazingly, embarrassingly stupid. It was so bad that even the children under 7 hated this episode. I repeat, it was so awful that even the show's child audience felt that they deserved better. Around here, we call Pouf de Fromage Poop de Fromage because it is a grand pile of donkey dung. The comedy in this is so juvenile that it made me question if this tale was even a part of the same series that gave us The Dreamcatcher, Uncle Howie, Mascot, Toy Train, or My Old House. It's unreal. Nobody likes Pouf de Fromage unless it's in a so bad it's good way. And even then, it's still a bad episode overall since it fails in every way it could because every lens I tried looking at it through could not find anything of value underneath. But if I could label this tale's biggest flaw under one word, it would be stupid. Pouf de Fromage is a stupid episode with a stupid plot featuring stupid characters, having stupid humor, and ending on a stupidly infuriating twist. Screw this episode, and more importantly, screw its piss-poor juvenile sense of humor. Pouf de Fromage is forever remembered as the Haunting Hour's worst episode by all the hardcore fans, and for good reason. This episode tried to be something else, but in the end, it resulted in something we'd rather forget.
Does he know I just farted?
Yes.
This is bad comedy.
How could this happen to me?
Number 2. Bad Egg. Holy this garbage is the worst. Whomever greenlit this travesty should have gotten fired. Because if they weren't, then somebody's going to pay when I shove up there. Because this was bile. This episode was pure, concentrated, nauseating bile. Bad Egg is one of the worst episodes of The Haunting Hour, nay, the worst light-hearted family comedy I have ever seen in my 9 lives. This tale is, surprise, surprise, another god-awful wacky comedy episode from our favorite horror show. Yay! Now, I've already done a feature film-length review on why this fail bomb is the biggest painful mark on The Haunting Hour's reputation. So if you want my full thoughts, see that video, because I want to get this over with as quickly as possible. In this torture, an obnoxious bratty fat kid named Jason accidentally gets an experimental monster egg who he has to take care of. Otherwise, his abusive father will ship him off to military school if he screws up one last time. No, you didn't mishear that. This silly children's comedy episode honestly has an abusive father character. A light-hearted comedy tale has a father who emotionally, verbally, and physically abuses his kids in it. Yet the show still wants to sell this to us as a wacky, comedic, heartwarming adventure. Fail, Haunting Hour. Epic fail. Oh, but even if the abusive father was removed from the story, the episode still wouldn't work. Our quote-unquote hero, Jason, is one of the most detestable kid heroes I have ever followed on this show. Jason is a terrible main character who is almost worse than the guy who abuses him. I think I actually love Hitler more than this twerp. Jason is a douchey, rebellious troublemaker who learns the magic of friendship when he befriends the baby monster who hatches from his egg. Sadly, the writers totally failed to grasp character sympathy and were expected to feel for this brat who picks on his little brother, mouths off to those uncool authority figures, and actually makes his own life even worse than it was before out of sheer stupidity. No, really, the entire conflict about being threatened with military school and losing his pet monster all could have been resolved super easily if he had just told everyone the truth. But he doesn't. He just refuses to tell anyone about the blatantly obvious supernatural stuff occurring and lies to everyone when he has solid evidence that could have helped his case. And this is Bad Egg's largest flaw. The entire plot relies completely on idiot moments. Everyone in this story is the biggest moron in the universe, including our protagonist, who we're meant to pity. The heartwarming moments also fall so flat on their face into concrete that it makes us ask, why should you even care when nobody in this tale deserves our emotional investment, let alone our attention? The story is predictably every hide the pet from the adults cliche in the book. This tale tries so hard to be the new generation's E.T., but it's fueled by nasty, mean-spirited, cynical anti-humor that undercuts any positive moments it could have had. My biggest point to prove this is, well, the abusive father wins. Yep, the abusive father wins. The abusive father faces little to no punishment for being a prick and wins. He ships his stupid son off to military school, glad to permanently rid him from his life forever. Nothing but fun, soft zaniness here, huh, everyone? Oh, but Jason, who was supposed to shape up as a better person by the end thanks to his one-day friendship with the baby egg monster, never grows up or changes himself. He's still the exact same douchey hooligan who hates everyone by the finale and promises to use his pet monster to cause even more harm to others at military school for a larf. Ha 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 ha. Blow me. This episode really fails badly in the heartwarming moments department, since the writer constantly soils on any speck of hope with even more mean-spirited comedy that just kills the mood before it can even begin. This tale is much, much worse than Poop de Fromage was because it tried to be an emotional story about true friendship between a boy and his pet. But it ended up being a painful, dull, slow, badly written mess. This is Eric Patterson and Jessica Scott's worst work on this show, and quite possibly their down spiral into insanity because all their other episodes after this one got progressively worse as they kept dipping their hands into the dark comedy pot again and again. Guys, just because Grantpires was a great dark comedy doesn't mean that you're experts at it now. I hate this episode and recommend staying as far away from it as you possibly can, because it was so bad that it doesn't even feel like it came from the Haunting Hour. It feels like it was a piss-poor dated Disney sitcom. I do think this is one of the worst episodes ever from the show, and it deserves to be broken and forgotten. Bad Egg could have been a truly uplifting tale about overcoming a lonely childhood and abuse, but it came out as an insulting egg on our faces. Burn in extra crispy hell, Bad Egg.
What happens if I put it on a swing, it falls off, and cracks its head?
Don't put it on a swing.
Kids love swings.
Not these kids.
What if, when I'm teaching it how to ride a bike, it falls off?
Look, just don't break the egg, okay?
You called it an egg. My child is very offended with this topic.
That was so terrible, I think you gave me cancer.
Before we mercifully conclude this hit list, here are some dishonorable mentions. I'm Not Martin. Not only was this a bizarrely unfaithful adaptation of a Nightmare Hour tale, but it might be the most confusing episode this show has ever had. This story tries so hard to be the upgraded version of Sick, but it was sunken by so many large gaping plot holes. I honestly didn't put it on the main list because I hated every other episode more than this one. Terrible Love. I think the title of this one speaks for itself. The Haunting Hour tries to do a Valentine's Day special, but it was just cringy. My biggest gripe with this one is the villain. The drugged-up psycho boyfriend was a horrendously bad actor that he makes Tommy Wiseau look like Humphrey Bogart in comparison. He was that laughable. However, I did not put it on the list because the guy who played Cupid was genuinely funny, so there was a saving grace. Sans. I won't sugarcoat things. I hate this episode. I hate it a lot. In 2 words, this episode can be described as predictable and cliched. And if there were 2 things the Haunting Hour should never be, it's predictable and cliched. The only reason why it's not among the top 10 was because I had no room for it. Consider this number 11. And now, without further ado, let's roll out our number 1. Number 1. My Robot. Oh yeah, this is, without a doubt, the worst episode this show has ever offered us, period. I know I've been saying that a lot throughout this video, but I mean it this time. This episode was failure incarnate. My Robot is an ungodly, poorly written, sloppy, infuriating abomination that should never, ever exist because its sheer horribleness is powerful enough to tarnish The Haunting Hour's reputation as a perfect horror series. Yep, this was the first episode that made me realize that our favorite, awesome, epic, horrifying nightmare show was not as good as we all thought it was. My Robot is about 2 nerdy losers named Tim and Philip dealing with a defective evil robot Philip ordered online, as they soon struggle to fight for their lives in an incredibly stupid horror adventure. Philip initially ordered the robot from the internet because he wanted it to help him do his chores and other mundane tasks, but it turned out that the robot was insane and took over his life, forcing Philip to be his obedient son. Yeah, apparently this robot took over his entire life and does horrifying stuff to him, like forcing Philip to eat veggies and exercise. Oh no! Wait, what? That's it? Eating healthy and working out? Ooh, how scary. The robot also apparently forced Philip's parents to move out of the house so he can have their son all to himself, and they just went along with it. Yep, for reals, the robot kicked Philip's parents out on the street, and they put up no fight to get their son back, or their house, and don't even call the cops or the technicians who created the robot for help. This plot is another oh-so-fabulous case where the entire story requires everyone being an idiot. The worst writing mistake any creator could ever do. This episode also kickstarted my rivalry towards Melody Fox. She was once a gifted writer on The Haunting Hour, making stuff like Alien Candy, Lights Out, Checking Out, and my personal favorite of hers, My Imaginary Friend. But then she lost her dang mind and started farting out mindless dribble like this. My Robot marked the death of her creativity on this show because it was so unoriginal and poorly constructed that I was convinced she had to be on drugs to come up with anything in this stupid adventure. Some people have told me that the robot taking over Philip's life is meant to symbolize an abusive parent controlling their children and dominating their social lives. But to that I say,
That makes it worse.
indeed. If this was meant to represent abused children, well, it fails horribly, winning an embarrassingly laughable award in ignorance. Does anyone really want to argue that this tale was positive representation on child abuse? Heck no. Melody Fox is not smart enough to write a deep tale about dealing with abusive relationships, because this is the same woman who wrote Mrs. Worthington. You know, that tale about how bully victims should forgive their idiot bullies and abusive family members for inflicting mental trauma upon them. So you can imagine how good this one is going to be. This episode has the most boring, unscary, uninteresting, and unentertaining pacing the show could ever reach. For long amounts of time, nothing is happening. We follow the stupid kids in their daily boring lives, encounter some cringy, bad-acting bullies, and when we do finally meet this robot, it is just lame. This thing looks like a trash can, and is just as bad as everything else in this episode. We're meant to be terrified of this thing? You've got to be kidding me. This might be the least intimidating robot we'll ever see. The robot on SpongeBob was scarier. So what is the first horrifying thing this evil killer robot does to show off how badass he is? He crushes a soda can. This is the least impressive monster this show has ever had. He crushes a soda can. A soda can. Are you serious? How could the same show that had a terrifying reality warper, a scary killer doll, a chick with her face cut off, a giant monster mascot, a demonic Spider-Man, a ghost ice cream truck, and the living embodiment of fear itself, give us this? The robot is so cringy. Oh, and if you're wondering why I consider this episode worse than both Bad Egg, Poop de Fromage, and Stage Fright combined, well, here's why. Those episodes at least tried to be comedic and silly fun for the kids. But this episode was intended to be taken 100% seriously. This episode wanted us to take it in as a serious horror story. This was meant to be nightmare-inducing. Do I even need to point out any more failures on this? Well, I will. So Philip convinces Tim to help him defeat his abusive robot foster daddy by setting up a trap to shut it down and reprogram it. So, who do they ask for help in taking down this soda can crushing robot? Do they ask the police, their parents, their friends, their teachers, or Apple techies for help? Nope, they beg the school's idiot bullies for help. Melody Fox, are you high? These kids who need real serious help to kill a fat Terminator ask the idiot bullies who beat the crap out of them and mock them every day for help. Melody Fox, you are exiled from life. This was the point where I asked if this chick even understood kids at all. Who the hell asks their idiot bullies for help in a life and death situation? How could the same woman who gave us a tale about a child growing up, letting go of his imaginary friends, and confronting his inner mental demons once and for all, write this? This is unbelievably stupid, even in a show with over-the-top fantasy monsters. They actually beg their bullies for help. Yeah, you can all bet this got a 0 out of 10 from me. So after the idiot bullies fail and run off, the kids reboot the stupid trash can, but our twist ending reveals that Philip was a and he was using Tim all along to dump the robot onto him. So now, Tim gets punished by having the robot force himself into his life for all eternity. Yep, instead of, I don't know, sending the robot to the idiot bullies who beat the crap out of him for fun, Philip betrays the one and only true friend he ever had. Ha 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 ha, screw this episode. This is horrible. Thank you, Melody Fox, for teaching children that it's perfectly A-okay to stab your friends in the back. That's right, kids. If you're ever in danger, ask your idiot bullies for help, take matters into your own hands, and toss your real friends under the bus to save your own skin. Because Melody Fox says it's okay. My robot is an idiotic plot hole pile of horse guano that's not scary, not original, not interesting, not amusing, and full of really, really, really mean-spirited schlock up the wazoo. The story makes me want to kill all the people who greenlit this. The horror is non-existent, the twist is painfully forced in, the characters are so stupid that it's a miracle they even remember when to breathe, and it kills any resemblance of The Haunting Hour being a perfect, flawless show. I still cannot believe that The Haunting Hour had this episode under its belt, because it feels so beneath it. Don't watch My Robot, because everything about it is awful. It took a clever concept and made it the stupidest story you could ever imagine. This episode could have been so cool if the writer was intelligent and cared about the story. But it ended up being a broken, defective tool that needs to be tossed away in the garbage, incinerated, shredded, and recycled into soda cans. This is, in all truth, without argument, the #1 worst episode of R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour.
Robot boy and his bodyguard. Yo, I've been meaning to ask you. Is your robot in the robot?
And that was the end to my top 10 worst episodes of R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour. These episodes were genuine bile. However, I'm so glad to get this over with now, since I can talk about this show's positive elements again real soon. So, what did you guys think? Was I on the money with my episodes? Were there any that I missed? Were there any you defend in spite of all the hate? What are your top 10 worst Haunting Hour episodes? Well, feel free to post in the comment section below, because I need a cat nap right now. So, remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, or just tune in for more videos posted here on Wolf Entertainment. I'm your host, Catastrophe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
What? You're all still here? The show's over. You can leave now. Alright, I'll tell you all what Cat's really reviewing next. He's going to do